Hunting the Four Periods of the Rut, a whole volume devoted to the understanding of the whitetail's most important and complex ritual, the rut. Written and told by one of America's most favored authors and whitetail deer hunter, Dick Idle. Let's watch Dick as he reveals the secrets of the rut.
Of all the different areas of advanced hunting knowledge, none offers the possible rewards in terms of hunter success as does fully understanding the rut and using that knowledge to hunt it. For all practical purposes, the activity of the bucks is affected by the influence of the rut throughout the hunting season. So the more a hunter knows about it, the better his chances of answering the question that is the essence of buck hunting. How can I predict when a particular buck will be where? Understanding the rut becomes even more important when one imagines hunting big bucks without the influence of the rut. If that were the case, the term unkillable buck would certainly take on a new meaning. My definition of the rut is the entire period in which a buck's behavior is influenced by the breeding season. So, to fully understand buck behavior, the entire span of the rut is broken down into 4 distinct periods. In each, buck activity differs, as do the tactics used to hunt them. These 4 periods, in the order in which they occur, are rut preparation, pre-breeding, breeding, and post-breeding. I will begin by examining the first period, which begins in late summer, rut preparation. It starts the week antler velvet is shed, and it continues until the first large show of scrapes is apparent. The odd scrape may be found during this period, but they will be few and far between. In most areas, this rut preparation period falls between the first week of September and mid-October, which may be either gun or bow season, depending on the state or province. The term rut preparation is used to describe this period because that's exactly what it is. Nature is preparing the players in her game to assure that the strongest, healthiest, and most superior males do the breeding in order to more successfully perpetuate the species. It's a time when sparring matches are numerous, helping each buck to establish dominance and give him a sort of blind feel for his rack dimensions and what he can do with his antlers. Without knowing why, he's in intensive physical training for the competition that's destined to come. Rubbing activity steadily increases throughout this period as bucks thrash bushes and trees almost daily and mark each with their personal scent as evidence of their presence. Slim-necked, unmasculine bucks in early season eventually progress into muscular, thick-necked males that are fine-tuned for the rigors of fighting and breeding. In this rut preparation period, sign reading is extremely important in determining the fact that bucks are in an area where they are feeding, bedding, and traveling, and where and how to hunt them. Relatively speaking, this is a difficult period to hunt, as bucks are very reclusive, do not travel great distances, and generally segregate themselves from does and deer concentrations. As a rule, their short daily travel pattern simply goes from bedding to feeding, then back to bedding. Because locating bucks is often difficult, rubs are probably the most important sign to look for. They outline where the buck is feeding, traveling, bedding, and spending much of his time. When scouting during this period, I normally go to the food source first. Every area has a preferred type of crop, whether it is soybeans, alfalfa, acorns, or some other food. If bucks are feeding heavily here, some rubs and large tracts should be visible along the perimeter of the field or other feeding area. From the tracks and rub locations, one should be able to select the most well-used trails to the feeding area and then follow them back towards the bedding area. Even though these trails may become faint and dispersed as they get nearer the bedding sites, one can at least get a general direction in which the bucks are moving to bed up and which trails are most heavily used. Rubs will be a great aid in determining which trails the bucks are using most often. As for the size of rubs, I do pay special attention to those on very large trees. From my experience, large bucks sometimes rub small trees, but small bucks very seldom rub large ones. Pay attention to the relationship of the trail and which side of the tree is being rubbed, as this may give clues to the buck's direction of travel, especially for bucks entering and leaving the area on different trails. Fresh rubs interspersed among year-old ones quite likely could have been made by the same buck, or they simply could mark an area where several bucks spend substantial amounts of time. Because sign interpretation is so important during this period, one needs to utilize all of the sign that's available in order to fill in the pieces of the puzzle and thus interpret the buck's overall travel pattern. Tracks are important for establishing the presence of deer, but they also tell a lot more. Tracks make trails, trails link bedding, feeding, and breeding areas, and all of these link together to form a network of travel patterns. Even droppings, whether small or large, fresh or old, provide valuable information when one's primary objective is to decipher travel patterns. At this point, the hunter has located the bucks and used all of the available sign to establish travel patterns. It's now time to make this knowledge work by formulating a hunting game plan. Because bucks now are on a regular pattern between feeding and bedding, the most logical approach is an ambush along their travel route, usually from a tree stand. Often, bucks are still traveling in bachelor groups during the rut preparation period, and they naturally browse in a meandering pattern as they approach their primary food source. This can make a ground ambush difficult. For afternoon hunts, a logical stand location usually will be at the food source or near the trails that enter it, depending upon whether or not bucks enter the area before dark. After feeding all night, most bucks will leave the area before daylight, so stands need to be along trails near bedding areas, but not in them. And when the situation allows, a ground location might be effective. Let's watch as Rick has found such an ambush situation.
I was tickled with a shot. So,
Well, I
you know,
guess.
he was just getting ready to move, and
Was he walking or standing?
I don't remember. I think he was standing, but he looked like, you know, he knew I was there getting ready to shoot, and he just started to move a little bit, you know.
I'm wondering if he was walking or not, because here he's got
Well, see, yeah,
he went
his,
through the
his arm,
leg.
his leg was up like this, and I think the arrow went through there and into there, and then out the
Well,
other
you got
side.
good penetration from that bow, I'll tell you that.
I like it.
Well,
I
that's
wanted
good.
to try it out. I like it just fine.
I'm
Did-
impressed with it.
did a good job.
If you hit one, it's got to be good. With the arrival of the pre-breeding period, the landscape takes on a new look. Colder temperatures and shorter days have done their work as trees become bare and lush green vegetation turns brown. For the white-tailed buck, thoughts of breeding begin to overshadow other necessary life functions of food and security, and his attention shifts to the next level of the breeding cycle. The pre-breeding period begins in mid-October in most northern latitudes and continues until approximately the third week of November. This time frame may not be exact for some southern states, but its beginning can be determined visually by the obvious opening of scrapes and scrape lines, and its end by the presence of does that are receptive for breeding. Rubs, tracks, droppings, and other types of sign basically give one the same information as during the rut preparation period. All are still used to sort out travel patterns as in the first period, but in the pre-breeding period, scrapes add a new dimension. They are nature's set place where buck meets doe. In this complex ritual, bucks leave both scent and visual markers at scrapes, which provide sites where the most dominant males and females can get together. Life never seems to change. The guys are still trying to impress the girls, so let's step into the Silver Dollar Saloon and watch the boys do some two-stepping. Understanding how the scrape phenomenon works is certainly necessary, but the real value of scrapes lies in their helping the hunter to decipher a buck's travel pattern and ultimately to predict when he will travel past a particular point. Other types of sign conclusively show that a buck has been there, but none predicts as reliably as the scrapes that he'll return. Here you can see an example of a typical scrape under an overhanging branch, commonly found along the perimeter of a primary food source, in this case a field of alfalfa. During this pre-breeding period, bucks alter their travel patterns to include doe concentrations as the males sense the time for breeding is drawing near. Scrapes become numerous and well used here, as these locations eventually will become breeding areas. Scrapes predict a buck's return, and trails between them predict to where and how he'll return. The end result is a scrape line that very accurately predicts a route one or more bucks are traveling regularly. During this period, there are several good choices of hunting tactics that can be productive. Because bucks are becoming progressively more excited about the prospects of finding receptive does, but no hide doe is yet available, rattling and calling are at their best. Now, bucks are ranging farther and farther, checking distant scrapes in hopes of locating that first willing doe, and the males often bed near scrape lines. This makes rattling especially productive in areas where scrape activity is heaviest. When proper scouting has been completed, an analysis of the movement pattern should allow an accurate prediction of where and how the buck travels. With an ambush site in mind, a quiet approach to the location should be made, and here, one must avoid getting too close to the bedding area. A well-placed tree stand is by far the most popular choice for this situation, as it affords a better view in heavy cover and it allows deer to pass without winding the hunter. I really can't describe the proper setup any better than the hunt tells it. Listen as Gene gives a first-hand account of his spectacular buck. Son, I'm going to tell you, this is what it's all about right here. What do you think of your first Canadian buck?
He's incredible. Look at the mass on him.
Well, I'll tell you, for a basic 8, when you told me he was just a basic 8, I'll tell you, you've had me thinking something different.
What do you think he'd score?
Well, I think just what we roughed him out there, what I came up with there a little while ago is about 180 gross. That's counting all his non-typical points, but I'm guessing he probably would net in the high 150s, maybe 160s, and for an 8-pointer, buddy, that ain't bad.
Yeah, he's got these non-typical points here.
Yeah.
Branch stand with his time there.
He's super. Have you ever shot a non-typical before?
Not like this.
I can believe that. Yeah, I think we put the tape on him at about 24 inches on the outside, and he's got some circumferences, 6-inch bases, and some nearly 6 all the way out to his last points.
Look at his body size, too.
I'll tell you, I just love these Canadian bucks. This one here, we've weighed some, and this one here was about like some of those that weighed about 300 pounds on the hoof. And having looked at his teeth, I think he's fairly young, probably at about 4.5, possibly 5.5, and that's...
You think he's that young?
I'm pretty sure his teeth are real sharp. Doesn't look like he has much wear at all. Just an incredible animal, I'll tell you. You know, his neck would have been a lot bigger in November had he made it that long. But you can see he's been working the trees pretty much here, all the bark he was leaving. That accounts for some of them big rubs we found around that field there where he was working pretty hard.
tell you, you can't do no better than that.
I'm really tickled with it.
I'll take 8 pointers like that all day. You know, from all those big rubs around there and those scrapes, I knew there was something really good working around that alfalfa field, but I had no idea it was that good. And a lot of times, even when you find that kind of sign, you end up killing them by some kind of fluke. Very seldom does it happen in the very classic way where you set up for him and, you know, and you kill him like you're supposed to kill him. From what you've told me, this sounds like one of those classic cases. How would you relate it?
Well, it happened just like a dream. We read the sign right. When we got in there, saw those big rubs and scrapes.
Weren't they huge?
Yeah. We knew that was the area where
there were some on 4 or 5 inch diameter trees, wasn't it?
Yeah, really. We set it, we found the line of scrapes from the heavy woods to the feeding area. That was the exciting thing because we knew there was a big buck working it.
Mm-hmm. And he had so many more scrapes on that particular trail than he had on any of the rest of them, too. That's why I felt good about it, too.
Yeah, well, I set the stand up right between 2 big scrapes.
Mm-hmm.
I figured that'd be as most likely
on the trail.
On the trail.
Yeah. How deep back in was he?
Maybe a little over 100 yards.
Yeah.
It wasn't too far back in. I didn't want to get too deep, but I waited. I got in there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't want to leave my scent in the area too late in the evening. A couple of small bucks came through early, walked right through the scrape, and kept on going. About an hour before dark, this one came through.
Did you hear him, or was he just...
He was just slowly, casually walking along, and when I spotted him, I knew he was a good one. I saw he had mass, but I didn't know how good.
Yeah. It's still pretty light about an hour before, but it's getting dark enough back in the woods that it's hard to judge them as accurately.
I don't think he'd have gone to the field completely before it got dark.
Yeah.
I think he'd have stayed back in the woods.
Well, he follows suit, just like we found out about all the other bucks. They're leaving the fields long before light in the morning, so you don't have much choice but to hunt them in the afternoon. And if you wait and stay out on the field, he hardly gets there before it's too dark, so you don't have much choice but to pick the right trail with the most sign on it, and then get deep enough to try to cut him off before he has time to get there.
Well, that's what he did. He let those smaller bucks walk through first.
Well, there's not many times that you actually do it the classic way. Find the sign, set up on him, and have him come where he's supposed to do it. Very seldom happens like that, but this is one of those rare cases, it looks like.
Worked out perfect.
I'll say it worked out better than perfect.
Each big game species has its own special scheme to accomplish breeding. The dominant bull elk, or herd bull as he's often called, gathers and controls a harem of cows through vocalization or bugling. The whitetail species has its own unique system of getting the proper parties together as well. The receptive doe seeks out the buck of her choice by waiting near a scent mark scrape. This act marks the beginning of the 3rd stage of the rut, the breeding period. This relatively short period of breeding normally lasts 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the region, and it occurs within the exact same time span of dates each year as do all the other periods. In most northern zones, the dates will fall roughly between November 15th and December 1st. Visible signs of bucks actually traveling with does mark its beginning, and its end occurs when there are no receptive does left. In the early stages of the breeding period, bucks show visible evidence that the long-awaited breeding ritual has arrived. Lip curling, chasing, bucks traveling with does, and the reluctance to leave them and a different body language all are telltale signs that the breeding period is nearly at hand or is actually in progress. At this point, one needs to understand the dramatic changes in buck behavior, as they are very relevant to hunting tactics. Throughout this period, dominant bucks will be in the company of does 80 to 90% of the time. Their total interest now is concentrated on locating and breeding does, as food and security take on secondary importance. Dominance now plays a vital role in determining who will actually have the right to breed. Subdominant bucks roam from one group of does to another, hoping to find a receptive female unattached. Rigid travel patterns no longer exist, as all bucks roam from one family unit or breeding area to another and spend varying amounts of time at each, depending upon whether or not unattached does are located. Although occasionally worked, scrapes and rubs no longer can be relied upon to predict a buck's return or travel pattern. Breeding areas, which are associated with primary food sources and doe concentrations, become the center stage for bucks and consequently the hunter as well. More really big bucks probably have been taken during the breeding period than during all the rest combined, and it's for one good reason: exposure. The urge to breed is so strong that bucks follow hot does into vulnerable terrain during daylight hours, something that seldom occurs during any other period of the rut. In some regards, hunting a particular buck now is more difficult because he has no predictable travel pattern. On the other hand, hunting bucks in general can be more successful simply because they expose themselves more often in vulnerable locations during daylight hours. There is one travel pattern characteristic that the hunter can count on, however. Bucks will be traveling and spending time with does. As a result, a hunting plan based on the doe's travel pattern often is just the ticket. In most areas of North America, doe concentrations form near primary food sources in late season. Bucks often cover miles going from one feeding area to the next in search of hot does. An ambush along these trails often can be productive. Many of the dominant bucks actually will be traveling with does, so hunting setups, whether ground or tree stands, along routes approaching feeding areas will be a good bet. Wiser bucks now may expose themselves later in the morning or much earlier in the afternoon than they otherwise would. Because bucks now are moving so much during daylight hours, slip hunting and other tactics, wherein the hunter simply is in the woods, may be quite successful. Deer drives or short pushes in smaller clumps of cover also can produce excellent results, as bucks may abandon their usual deep woods bedding locations to lay up with does. Rattling, for all practical purposes, is not very productive now unless buck-doe ratios are very balanced. Although hunting styles are quite different during this period, it's a great time to take a monster buck such as this 160-inch Canadian trophy. Winter has set in as whitetails enter the fourth and final chapter of the rut, the post-breeding period. For some deer, bitterly cold temperatures and deep snow now become major obstacles in their daily routine. It's a time when all wildlife species shift their priority to one instinctive thought: survival. Nature has prepared each animal with a heavy insulating coat and fat reserves, but now all must contend with scarce food as they simply try to survive the winter. With the end of the breeding season, the whitetail buck likewise experiences a shift in priorities as his own thoughts turn to food and security once again. For weeks, his energy has been directed towards the reproduction ritual, and hundreds of travel miles interspersed with rutting activity have taken their toll. Now, the gaunt, tired buck seeks rest, food, and security. But this relaxed attitude doesn't happen overnight, because the number of receptive does declines slowly. Since the bucks don't know precisely the week when hot does no longer will be found, the first week or two of the post-breeding period finds bucks, especially the dominant ones, still searching for the last hot does. Naturally, they focus their attention on the breeding areas and doe concentrations described earlier. As this period progresses, and traveling bucks no longer find receptive does, they gradually spend less time searching and more time feeding and resting. After a couple weeks of unproductive searching, all buck travel tapers off dramatically. In every region, there are some does, especially young ones, that don't get bred during the main breeding period. Although only a small percentage of the overall female population, these does and fawns become receptive to breeding roughly 30 days after the primary breeding period. Then, buck activity once again flares up. Bucks concentrate near these isolated breeding scenes, and hunting can be very productive when such a situation is located. In most northern regions, this fourth and final period of the rut begins in early December and continues until all rut activity has ended. There are no hunting seasons in many states and provinces during this post-breeding period, especially during its latter stages. However, if the season is open, hunting for big bucks can be excellent. During the first 2 weeks of the post-breeding period, rattling and ambush tactics near the doe concentrations and breeding areas can be deadly. Tracks and trails will be the primary sign used to determine locations for either method. Scrapes and rubs occasionally will be worked at this time, but the hunter shouldn't rely too much on their presence in trying to predict travel patterns. As one gets deeper into this fourth period, bucks tend to become more nocturnal and seek bedding areas in heavier cover. One hunting technique that works well during this time is forced movement or the deer drive. In larger cover, a 1 or 2 man push with hunters posted inside the woods can work well because bucks generally will be reluctant to break into the open. When bucks can be found in smaller islands of cover, a push that forces them across larger openings, such as fields, often produces some surprising results. If the drive is properly executed, there's no telling what might break out of the cover. And so, the final chapter closes on a 5-month journey that's taken the whitetail buck through another breeding season. With the rut preparation, pre-breeding, breeding, and post-breeding period of the rut ended, life takes a new direction. All in all, it's been a long season for the hunted and the hunter alike. Each views the next few months from a different perspective. For the hunted, visions of brown-eyed does and persistent hunters are transformed to thoughts of everyday living. I wonder if this rain will ever end. For the hunter, impressions of memorable events of the past few months soon are replaced by a magic that keeps all of us going, the fantasies of next season.
Welcome to Dick Idle Whitetail World. Now located in Raleigh, North Carolina, it's not the largest store around, but it's certainly the most unusual and impressive anywhere, with the Whitetail Hall of Fame and many hard-to-find whitetail hunting-related accessories. Whitetail magazines and books, clothing, gift items, photos, hunting equipment, and the country's largest selection of hunting videos are all here. And of course, there's always some big whitetails on display. Open 7 days a week, so stop by next time you're in the area. Also, if you'd like a free copy of our full-color whitetail report, write or call the following location: Dick Idle Whitetail World, 8601G Glenwood Avenue, Raleigh, North Carolina 27612. Outside North Carolina, call 1-800-622-2730. In North Carolina, call 919-783-9494.